Good afternoon, everyone. This is Kathy Hart, and I'm giving a brief overview of the practical nursing program in Delta, Colorado, the history from 1979 to 1921. The program did close in 2022, and we did initially present this program to an alumni group in April of 2022 at the time of the closure. The reason we were trying to preserve the history of the school is it was really the only of the three technical colleges in Colorado. It was the only one that was in a rural setting, and the program did many firsts. There were many years when we were top with NCLEX nationally. We had a profoundly dedicated faculty, and we really feel like we added a lot to not just the region, not just Delta or the region of Western Colorado or even the state, but we really feel like we made a difference for nursing itself. So starting back at the very beginning in 1969, the Delta Montrose School of Practical Nursing received state board approval. We have always been part of the Delta School District. The classes began in October of 1969. The lectures were given at Delta Junior High and High School, and they had several clinical sites. 1969 through 1972, the students traveled to Durango for their OB-PEDS clinicals. I'll have more on that in a minute when we talk about the 70s. And the first class graduated in October of 1970. In 1971, Mesa College actually assisted us with some administrative functions due to a staffing shortage in Delta. They did a lot of the admissions and records kind of work. In 1974, OB-PEDS clinicals were moved from Durango to St. Mary's in Grand Junction. In 1976-77, the Delta High School District started the Area Vocational School, aka the VOTech, and nursing moved to the technical school. And 1977 was the first graduates from the technical school. So we're really a school with two beginnings, one in 1969/70 and one in 1977. The 1980s brought a stabilization of the program, and you could see the infrastructure begin to develop. In 1980, Sherry Barkley and Claudia Reel became the instructors. Claudia became a program coordinator in the early 80s. In 1984, there was an articulation of credits. In other words, credits would transfer to Mesa College. In 1985, we started the Horizon Scholarship, which some of, if you're an alumni watching this, you may have received that. In 1987, the PN program had 52 applicants for 22 spots, 100% pass rate on the state board exams. And in 1989, that was the year that Sherry Barkley became our program coordinator. The 1990s are some of the most interesting years for the program, and these are what I would call the growth and expansion era for the program. It was really, really fascinating to go through the archives and look at this decade, because we did a lot of really interesting, unique, cutting-edge stuff. In 1991, we had a Desert Storm class. The LPN class was offered to the Army National Guard in response to Operation Desert Storm. This was a second section of the classes we were already offering in Delta, so they had two different groups. One was this Army National Guard group, and the other one was our regular class. In 1991, we were also approved for Trinidad State I can almost talk. We were approved for Trinidad State Junior College to provide an associate degree program, and the state board had approved that. And then in 1992, 9 practical nurses began this associate degree program provided by Trinidad Junior College. In 1993, we had the first graduates from the Trinidad State program. They used an Optel program for how the classes were. So this was a satellite, very early version of Zoom. And so we were really cutting edge with that. And then we saw the first graduated class got 100% on their NCLEX in 1993. In 1994, we see Judy Davis and Jeannie Robb are the full-time instructors. There was a part-time track also offered for PN students at that point. Then comes Y2K. And what I saw when I was looking at the whole big picture was really that we were raising the bar, that the state was changing and we were required to do accreditations and things that we had not been required to do before. So in 2000, we had the first statewide nursing articulation agreement was adopted, and Sherry Barkley was one of the ones that helped to develop that. And then in 2001, Sherry went to the state board, was a member of the State Board of Nursing. So we're super proud of Sherry for all that she did for our program and for the state. In 2004, the LPN program was provided at Mesa State College's Western Colorado Community College campus. So we provided that. We took the program and had one program in Delta and then another class going on at Grand Junction. And then in 2005, Sherry Barkley retired, and Jody Rober became our program coordinator and director. Bertie Young was hired that year as a clinical instructor. And then we see this trend towards unification with the other programs and accreditation, and these things continue. So in 2006, the State Board of Nursing set a new requirement that all nursing programs in the state become nationally accredited, and also required that 50% of all faculty hold MSN. So even if you go back to the very early documents, they always wanted an MSN. They always required a BSN and wanted an MSN, but this was the first time it was required for a certain level of the faculty to have an MSN. And then we also required a common curriculum with the Colorado schools. So that meant Nursing 101 in Delta would have to be the same as Nursing 101 in Aurora, the same class. A student could take Nursing 101 in Delta, transfer it to Aurora, and they'd have the same information. It's interesting if you go and look at the oral history for the faculty page. There's a video that Jody Rober did, and she talks about the process during that time. And I can definitely feel the change almost in her take on the program and the interview, the difference between what Sherry encountered in the program and what Jody encountered. And I think that had a lot to do with these increasing standards. So if you get a chance, please listen to that. In 2006 to 2009, we saw the beginning of the simulation program. Scholarship programs continue to grow. And we were working on accreditation requirements at that time. So lots going on in those years as well. The 2010s and 2020s are maintenance to closure. And we became nationally accredited by what was then NELNAC, and that was into 2011. And so Jody Rober really led that effort. Bertie Young became the program director after that happened. And Bertie's background was in simulation, her master's degree, so she was able to carry the simulation program that Jody had started forward even further. And our program ranked #1 nationally on the NCLEX at that point. In 2015, the Delta Practical Nursing Program received full national reaccreditation, and the part-time option ended. And then in 2018, Jeannie Robb and Bertie Young both retired, and I became the program director that year. And then from 2010 to 2020, after that 2018, after the retirement sort of started and fell like dominoes, so Judy Davis retired the following year after 30 years with the program. And so that was hard because we didn't have any faculty that had been there any period of time. And so everybody was starting new and just learning to teach after we had this solid core of instructors that had been there for years. And then the very next year, the COVID pandemic hit us. We had to move the program urgently and fully online. From March until graduation in 2020. So brand new instructors who are just learning to teach, just getting their feet on the ground, and suddenly they have to learn a whole new strategy for teaching. During this time, we also had a full-time position that was open that never filled, so we were carrying extra load anyway. In starting in the fall, we did provide the program. We did go back to some clinical on ground, but went with a lot of the classes were still online. And then our last class graduated in May of that year due to the faculty shortage, which was probably evident from 2012 or 2015 forward. But as long as that core faculty stayed, we were able to make it through that. But once they retired, we just lost a lot of infrastructure. So I like to look at a business model, and this just shows kind of how a business model starts and a program grows and hits maturity, and then we see decline. And we knew that we were on the verge of that decline, and we knew that Colorado Mesa was here, had a quality program, and it was really felt that it was better for our students and for our community to go ahead and move forward with a transition to Colorado Mesa. They had better systems to support the program in a continued fashion at that point. Please visit the CMU website for more information, or the CMU Montrose website for more information on their nursing program, but they will be doing a nursing program beginning in the fall of 2022 in the Montrose campus. All right, so now back to the 70s. In the 70s, we had two, what I call them, our pioneer coordinators or program directors. Ruth Edwards was the very first program coordinator of the Delta Montrose School of Practical Nursing, as it was called then. She was there from 1969 to 1972. She was involved with the initial program approval before the program started. She's on all the state board paperwork. You can see she was really working very hard. And the state board stated that in some of their documentation, is that she was clearly going above and beyond the call of duty to get the program organized. She oversaw the first 2 years of the program and unfortunately passed away in June of 1972. And the students did hold a memorial service for her at graduation that year. Now, Ruth is one that I tried to do some research on her to find out more whether any of her family were left, and I couldn't find anything. So if anybody that's watching this knows anything about Ruth Edwards or your family, please contact me. I'd love to have more information about this amazing woman. The next program coordinator was our first coordinator that was part of the VOTEC system, or the area vocational school. And her name was Virginia Young, and I just wanted to lay out some board requirements that were, this is a state board, laid out in 1977. And these were based on feedback to our program when we were going through the state board process. They said we could not carry out teaching and administrating concurrently, so they needed additional faculty. And the state board still requires that the director be at least 80% administrative and can't teach all the time. It needed a phone in their office due to confidentiality. At that point, the only phone on campus was in the library. And they also said we needed a typist at least 3 days a week at that point. So those of you who knew Jeannie or any of our secretaries before that, this was the beginning of that role, was actually from the state board as feedback to us on how to run the program back in the 1977. Perhaps the funnest part about putting this whole thing together was looking at some of the fun facts that you find kind of in between the lines in the paperwork. So 1970s fun facts. There was a separate board, state board of practical nursing in Colorado. If you look back through the 70s in the archives, you will see that we have some of those early state board documents about practical nursing requirements for the schools in those days. The program's first name was District 50J School of Practical Nursing, but that was changed to the Delta Montrose School of Practical Nursing prior to classes starting in the fall of '69. The original program was 1,700 contact hours, 1,705. That's a lot of contact hours, by the way. It's way more intense than our program was in the last few decades. The program was originally financed through the Manpower Development and Training Act and the State Board for Community Colleges and Occupational Education. Here are the documents, our state board approval letter and the two state board documents that we followed in those days as far as the rules and regs for the program, and those are again available in full in a scanned-in version online if you look through the 70s documents. Our original approval in 1970 or in 1969 was for only 12 students a year, and only 6 could be in clinical at a time. Eventually, we got to the point where we were taking almost 40 students a year, and we could have up to 10 in clinical at a time. So the ratios changed a little bit. The original faculty offices were at the junior high, and the classes were in a dedicated room at the high school. The original clinical sites locally were Montrose Memorial Hospital and Del Vista Nursing Home. The program opened in October of 1969, October 8th, on October 20th. So a full year later, on October 8th, 1970 was the first graduation. So the program was a full year back then. Originally, the program fell into the direction of the principal of the junior high school. This slide is just some newspaper clips of things that I just talked about. These are back in the clippings, if you look through the newspaper clippings for the 1970s on the archives page. Fun facts, the Strader Hotel. One of the things that I think really sets the program's early history apart from most other programs is that we traveled all the way to Durango to do OB-Peds clinicals. And if you're watching this from anywhere but Colorado, the drive between Delta and Durango requires going over Red Mountain Pass, which is a very challenging white knuckle kind of pass that you have to drive through, and it's a couple hours at least to get there with the pass there. It can be very treacherous in the wintertime. And our wintertime weather in the mountains can last until June. So the students really, and the faculty really put a lot into the program, a lot of effort into finishing their classes that I think is pretty amazing. The students went for OB-Peds clinicals in Durango. All 12 students went at the same time with 2 faculty. And the 3 students, so they had 3 students on OB and 3 on Peds in the morning, and then they came back and switched for the afternoon. The students stayed in Durango for 2 months straight, February and March, and the school paid for the rooms at the Strader Hotel. The faculty room doubled as a classroom from 1 to 3 p.m. So they set up card tables for the classroom and the faculty rooms. I don't know whether I'd like that. I'd probably have my underwear slung all over the place or something. And, it would just be interesting to have students having class in your bedroom for 2 months. Instructors were required to stay in the Strader Hotel for 56 days. The rooms were $14 a night, and there were 2 faculty. And the total faculty cost for the hotel rooms was $1,568. That's for 2 months. So that's a pretty good vacation right there. Right now, the rooms are about $130 a night at that time of year. There's just some pictures from Strader Hotel years. I think it's really interesting that they saved that. That's one of those placemats that you have in restaurants, and they saved that. All these years, it's still in the archives in its original form. And it's also in the scan document. So please look at the scan documents at the Delta Practical Nursing History site if you get a chance, because it has all these and more. Okay, so a few things that I mentioned earlier, but a little more detail, is that we saw Mesa College provide supervision for the program in the early 70s due to a heavy workload at the district in Delta. The school district contributed $830 per year for the appointed administrator in Grand Junction for their salary. The total program budget in 1971 was about $34,000, and that includes salaries and everything, and most of this was covered through federal and matching funds, and we just talked about who funded that. So the tuitions were much lower in those days because we got a lot more funding through other resources. And the same year, uniforms, caps, and hose, everybody got 3 pairs. So you can see that we were mostly female back then. Anyway, and name tags were provided by the school for a total cost of $282 for the entire program. So they got everything. They got all of those things, the uniforms, caps, hose, and name tags for all 12 students for $200. By 1974, the Delta School District resumed administration of the program, and the OB Peds clinicals were moved from Durango to St. Mary's. And this slide is just some fun pictures of what I was just talking about. Our early being a member of the Practical Nurse Association of Colorado, and one of our early class graduations. So just some fun pictures. Again, these are all in the archive, so please visit. Okay, so fast forward to 1976-77, and this was the VOTEC years. So this was our area vocational school, still part of the high school district, but now a bit of more of a college entity. The cost of the program for the students, the tuition, was $800, but that wasn't just tuition. That included uniforms, equipment, books, and a $30 fee for state board. So that's quite a bit different than what we pay today. In 1977, the program was approved for 18 students annually and had 90 credits. The first graduation after becoming part of Delta Montrose VOTEC was on December 23rd, 1977. Just some more documents that you'll see in the scan documents on the website from this era. So this slide was originally for our celebration, but I'm going to tell you to do exactly the same thing. Browse our class and candid photo books, browse our historic documents, network with other on our Facebook page. We don't have any refreshments online, or door prizes, but we do have all the documents and all the videos and everything are online at it's www.deltapracticalnursinghistory.wordpress.com. And so be sure to visit there, and there's a link there to our Facebook group, and we hope to be doing some things real time, like continuing to recognize our alumni. So please join in, and I hope you've enjoyed the presentation.